worst disproportion of inmates, as the incarceration rate for blacks in the state is more than 9 times that rate for whites. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Still seeing that trouble as you travel La Crescenta to wreck on the 210 eastbound at Ocean View Boulevard. Onto the right shoulder now. We're busy from Latuna Canyon. Looks like a wreck on that 170 south in Magnolia, North Hollywood area. That's made it to the right side. See that busy drive, though, as far back as Sherman Way. The 134 eastbound approaching the 5. This is Griffith Park, Glendale. Earlier troubles cleared from a center traffic lane. Right as you get to Forest Lawn Drive, you're on and off the brakes. Stalled vehicles still affecting our 60 westbound at Hacienda Boulevard. Stalled vehicle in a center lane were loaded up from Azusa Avenue.
At your Amazon Fresh store, you can rely on roasted chicken for $4.97, 2-pound bunches of bananas for 99 cents, French bread for 89 cents, and more. Visit your local Amazon Fresh store for low prices from A to Z and head to Amazon.com/savewithfresh to see this week's deals.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. A good day for both of LA's NFL teams. The Chargers and Rams are 2-2 after close wins. The Chargers beat the Raiders by 7 despite getting shut out in the second half. Linebacker Khalil Mack had 6 sacks, one shy of the NFL single-game record. The Rams get an overtime win at Indianapolis after blowing a 23-point lead. 22-yard touchdown pass from Matthew Stafford to Puka Nacua in OT gave the Rams a walk-off win. The Rams play Philadelphia next Sunday at SoFi. For the second straight year, the Dodgers finished the regular season with 100 wins. The Dodgers are off until Saturday. They will play the winner of the Arizona-Milwaukee series. The best-of-3 series starts on Tuesday. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
On Monday, October 9th, don't miss the KBLA Talk 1580 exclusive. The tape. 1 year later.
Y'all were coming for us.
Yeah, but Tavis, that's not in my heart. I wasn't coming for anyone like that. I apologize, but that was not me. That's not in my heart. And like I said a few moments ago, I have a solid, demonstrable record of shared power that's real and concrete. That can't be misinterpreted.
Join Tavis Smiley and an all-star panel of political insiders, influencers, and journalists for a look back at the crisis that shook LA City Hall when 4 Latino leaders were caught on tape making racist, demeaning, and derogatory statements about black people and other fellow citizens. On Monday, October 9th, exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580, The Tape, 1 year later. We'll broadcast live in afternoon drive from 5 to 7 p.m. with an immediate encore presentation from 7 to 9 p.m. When all was said and done, was more said than done. 1 year later, are there fractures in LA's black-brown political partnership? And where do we go from here? Don't miss The Tape, 1 year later. Only on KBLA Talk 1580, Monday, October 9th, live from 5 to 7 p.m. with an immediate encore presentation from 7 to 9 p.m. We've got a lot to talk about.
We'll hear argument next in case 20-1199, Students for Fair Admissions versus the President and Fellows of Harvard College. Mr. Norris?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you tuned in to our program today. We welcome WVON 1690 AM in the Windy City, Chicago, as a new affiliate carrying this program, and I couldn't be more thrilled than to know that we're being heard right now in one of my favorite cities in this country, the city of Chicago. So thank you, WVON, for carrying the Tavis Smiley program. In this hour, Emmy award-winning filmmaker Don Porter joins us to showcase our latest project, Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court. You just heard the voice of Chief Justice John Roberts moments ago. Deadlocked is a 4-part documentary series that traces the modern history of the Supreme Court and the people, decisions and confirmation battles that have shaped the court into what it is today. It's currently available on Paramount Plus with Showtime. Don Porter, an honor to have you on this program. How are you today?
I'm so well. It's a thrill to be here with you.
Thank you for the time. Glad to have this hour to talk to you about this series. I was just talking to Connie Rice, one of our regular contributors in our first hour, talking about the fact that the new term of the court commences today. So their summer recess is over. They are back in session, and there are a number of cases they'll be hearing in this term that will once again be very divisive, from race to guns to the role of the federal government, certainly federal government agencies, abortion, once again, and more. A lot to be discussed on this particular docket in this particular term. Let me start with a couple of broad questions, and then we'll narrow as we move through this hour. Let me just ask you point blank, what is your read on the Supreme Court as we speak? And by your read, I'm asking, given that so many Americans in every poll, study, and survey of late, so many Americans are disappointed in this court. The respect for the court is Connie said a moment ago that they're down with used car dealers right about now, in terms of the lack of respect we have for the court and what they do. So I think I just heard a phone line drop. I heard it in my ear. So let me just keep talking until we get Don Porter back on the line. I know a phone hang up when I hear one. So let me just again tee up where we're going in this hour. So Don has produced this series, and I want to get her take, as we will in just a moment when we get her back online here, about how she views the way the court is being viewed right now by millions of Americans. You heard Connie Rice say in our first hour today that their popularity is down there with used car dealers. They really are very, very disregarded and not appreciated in this moment. And I want to get Don's take on that. So, Don, let me stop talking and get your take. The question I was asking to get started here, a broad question, is how you read the way the American people see the Supreme Court in this present moment.
Yeah, that's a really important question, and that is why I wanted to make this series for Showtime. I think that historically, we start the series with the kind of triumphs of Thurgood Marshall, and we start the series with how important the Supreme Court has been to all Americans. But really, I could have made this series all about the Supreme Court and race. Because when you think about what we as Americans value about the court, what are some of the decisions that we look to? Brown v. Board of Education, voting rights upholding, even some of the criminal justice cases, many of which were resolved during the Warren Court era in favor of Black and brown people. So you have the right to an attorney, or you have Miranda warnings. So when we think historically about the Supreme Court, it really was a court that looked out for people without power. And so that was, once upon a time, Thurgood Marshall marching through, desegregating America, we would say, let's get to the Supremes. Let's get to that court because they're going to protect our rights. And today we have, it's something like 17% of Democrats have a favorable opinion of the Supreme Court. 60% of Republicans have a favorable opinion of the Supreme Court. So there's a big discrepancy in what Americans as a whole. It depends on your perspective, and our perspectives are not the same.
Yep. What's your read, again, just some big questions to start our conversation. We'll narrow as we move again through the hour. What's your read on how politicized the court has become? We'll talk about what you said a moment ago, that the court at one point, were protecting people without power, and now it's something altogether different. But give me your broad view on how politicized this court has become.
It does feel, I think, to many, many people that with these last three appointments to the court, so Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, that those are really politicized appointments. And that is not just a random belief, but that is taken from the idea that all of those justices came up with the support of the Federalist Society, a very conservative group that Donald Trump bragged that had created his list of people to be appointed, and all of those folks were on that list. So it's not just kind of a random thought that that the court's composition is comprised of people with ideologies that are very conservative. It is actually, there's actually some fire where there's not smoke.
Yep. Just getting started in this second hour today. The Supreme Court is back in session. Summer recess is over. The new term officially begins today. Don Porter's new series, award-winning filmmaker Don Porter, her new series is called Deadlocked: How America Shaped the Court, currently available on Paramount Plus with Showtime. We'll get right into this conversation when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac perfected like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Dilly, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com.
Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here with a quick recap from my time at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. There were speakers Ian Dunlap, Damon John, Lynn Richardson, MC Light, Don Kennedy, to name a few. Take a listen to what Justin Grant, Community Development Lead at Chase's Advancing Black Pathway, let's see what he had to say.
So I'm Justin Grant. I lead Community Development and National Partnerships for JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Pathway strategy. And so we're focused on strengthening the economic foundation of black communities, and we're making targeted investments in programs like the Advancing Black Wealth Tour to help us get our tools and resources out to the community to drive sustained impact over time.
So when it comes to black and brown people, it sounds like Chase is making it their personal responsibility not only to facilitate these events, but to educate and provide resources. So, Mr. Grant, I have to ask, what does wealth building look like for the individual?
It's home ownership, it's having that freedom to be able to start your own business and create jobs in your community, and it's having that long-term plan towards retirement, having that vision for what you want your life to be, and you have the resources to actually live it.
I'm Maisha Cairo. Thanks for sticking around. That was my recap from Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. First stop was here in LA, and they're taking it national.
A lot of schools talk about training the cybersecurity workforce of the future, but do they really deliver? My Computer Career has been supplying the IT workforce with thousands of skilled, certified pros for 15 years. Train with the experts in support, networking, or cybersecurity, and start your career in months, not years. Upskill even faster. On campus or live online. Qualified students may get financial aid, including the GI Bill. My Computer Career. Accredited, acclaimed, effective. Take the free career evaluation at mycomputercareer.edu.
Sounds different. Huh. This is Tavis Smiley.
Our guest is Don Porter, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. Her latest project is called Deadlocked: How America Shaped the Supreme Court. It's a 4-part documentary series tracing the modern history of the court and the people and decisions and confirmation battles that have shaped the court into what it is today, or put another way, what it ain't today, depending on one's perspective. We're having this conversation today in part because, in case you just tuned in, Supreme Court back in session today. The new term begins today. Summer recess is over, and so no time like the present to be talking about this documentary series streaming right now on Paramount Plus with Showtime. And again, pleased to have Don Porter, the filmmaker behind this project, as our guest in this hour. There are a couple things we were talking about earlier, Don, I want to come back to right quick before I move forward. And that is this notion, first of all, that you raised about how the court at times has sided with the people who don't have power. That's not the frame that we're in right now. All they do is side with the folk who are in power. But there was a moment in which they did some pretty good work on behalf of the folk without power. When would you identify that particular era? And as you look back on it, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, there's a very clear point in time when the court was really working to advance the rights, particularly of Black people. So before the Warren Court, which is, in the 1950s, the court really was using its power to assess economic questions. But when Earl Warren takes the bench, he says, well, the Bill of Rights applies to individuals, and those are the cases that we should be taking. So the job of the Chief Justice is really important in helping set the agenda of the court. There's a process by which they decide which cases come forward, but the Chief Justice assigns the opinions and who's going to write the opinions. And so Earl Warren, his term as Chief Justice coincides with another very, very significant event, which is Thurgood Marshall's lawyering across the country. So Thurgood Marshall and the lawyers that he worked with, most of whom were trained by Charles Hamilton Houston out of Howard. Marshall argues before the court 32 times, and he wins 29 of those times. So, we forget this history. And when you think about, what Marshall and his, compatriots were doing, is they were systematically dismantling segregation across the country. But what they were also doing is they were making the law that would govern how we treat racial minorities. So that is Marshall couldn't have done it alone. Warren couldn't have done it alone. They needed each other. And so they were the two right people at the right time. And so that, Marshall's wins at that point come even before he's appointed to be Solicitor General. The Solicitor General is the lawyer for the United States. So Lyndon Johnson, who's president at the time, he wants to appoint the first Black Supreme Court justice, and he has his eye on Marshall, who has such a stellar reputation. And so what Lyndon Johnson does is he appoints Marshall to be Solicitor General. He says every time it's the lawyer for the United States who stands up before the Supreme Court, it's going to be a Black man. And that's exactly what happens. And Johnson does that. So because he knows when he appoints Marshall to the court, when he nominates him, that he didn't want the Southern Dixiecrats to be able to say, he's not qualified. He's like, he's going to be the most qualified lawyer who has ever been nominated to the bench. And that's exactly what happens. So, there in that time period, you get some of the cases that I was talking about. You not only get Brown v. Board of Education, you get it to be unanimous. And so people who were there in the courtroom when Brown was announced said there was like a hush that fell over the courtroom. And people understood what a significant ruling it was, and that it was 9-0. And then several years later, the court reaffirms and said, in Brown, when we said segregation was unequal, we meant it. And so the court continues to enforce it, even with some of the most recalcitrant states, like, of course, Mississippi.
Yeah, I want to pause for a second here because I've been asked more times than I can count. I routinely get asked a question like this when you do what I do. These are the kind of questions that people pose to you when they see you or meet you. So tell me who you've not interviewed, who you would love to have interviewed. I get that question all the time. And Thurgood Marshall is on that list. I've never had a chance to interview Thurgood Marshall. Most Supreme Court justices, certainly back in the day, didn't sit for interviews anyway. That was not a part of what they did, as you well know. But I would love to have sat down with Thurgood Marshall for an interview on a variety of subjects. But I want to pause for a second because I hope the audience heard what you just laid out. Thurgood Marshall, prior to becoming Solicitor General. Now, when you're the attorney for the U.S. For the United States government, you expect to win most of your cases. We don't pick a Solicitor General who we expect to lose. So when he becomes Solicitor General and LBJ gives him that appointment, he does an amazing job. You expect to win those cases. You are, after all, representing the United States government. But prior to becoming Solicitor General, he argues 32 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, and he wins 29 of them. That is an enviable record, Don Porter. 29 of 32?
That's right.
Unbelievable.
And he won those cases when they were making somewhat new law. They were interpreting the Constitution in a way that had not happened before.
Yeah.
And so those black lawyers created this pathway for individual rights that would not just benefit black people, would benefit all people.
Yeah.
This is what the Constitution provides.
Yep. I had a guest on this program not long ago. Her name is LaDoris Cordell, brilliant justice, jurist, retired now here in the state of California, and she is a student of Thurgood Marshall. And I wish I had the exact number at my recall. I do not, because it's a strange number. But the point is that once he gets on the Supreme Court, the issue that he wrote about more than any other, I mean, thousands of times, Thurgood Marshall kept writing and kept writing and kept dissenting and kept dissenting and kept on dissenting about the death penalty. He could not abide. Yeah. He could not abide, as you know, the death penalty. And more than any other issue during his tenure, his long tenure on that court, the thing he dissented on more than anything else and wrote so many opinions about was the death penalty. That was a serious issue for him. And as I said, he could not abide the death penalty as law in this country. Another fascinating factoid about Thurgood Marshall. Let me just ask a broad question, since we're talking about Marshall. And again, you're the force behind this 4-part series, Deadlocked: How America Shaped the Supreme Court. How would you define over history the Supreme Court's relationship with race?
Yeah. Race appears in so many different ways in Supreme Court jurisprudence. So, of course, we start with Plessy v. Ferguson, which is one of the, original cases, which says, black people are 3/5 of a person, and so they can't qualify for XYZ. And then you get, of course, you move through history, and as we just discussed, you get Marshall and his compatriots dismantling the idea that black people are anything less than full people. But what you also see so many times are questions where race comes before the court either directly or indirectly. So in voting rights, in redistricting, in affirmative action, even in the criminal justice cases where you see the rhetoric around why people should get rights or not get rights. You see race, come up as it's always kind of just below the surface. And so it's not only important that Marshall was on the court writing majority opinions, it's important that he was on the court writing the dissents. And we see Ketanji Brown Jackson doing the same thing today. Mm-hmm. She is writing dissents looking towards the future. She's pointing out all the problems with some of the majority opinions that are being decided. And she's writing a roadmap to say, this is how cases have been decided in the past. This is why those cases decided in the past were decided correctly. This is the problem with the majority interpretation. There's all kinds of problems with all kinds of cases. But race is, you cannot disentangle Supreme Court jurisprudence from race in this country. It almost always comes up.
Let me ask you whether or not you think, back to Thurgood Marshall and now Ketanji Brown Jackson, do dissents matter?
Dissents are vital. And so just as you pointed out, Justice Marshall was constantly writing his dissents. He's actually trying to convince not only his current justices, but any future justices, because they read each other's opinions. Mm-hmm. The Constitution is actually a fairly bare bones document. And so what happens is the most important thing you have is interpretation. And so the justices are writing back and forth, and they're trying to convince each other. And if they can't fully convince each other, they're trying to say, well, agree with me on this one little part. And maybe that one little part is going to convince somebody going forward. So it's a really, interesting kind of relationship that they have. They're speaking as much to each other in their concurrences and their majority opinions and their dissents as they are to the lawyers and the advocates who are arguing the cases. So dissents are really vital. They give us a sense of, kind of where decisions, in the opinion of some, where they fall short.
Yeah. Let me pivot for a second here while we're talking about race, because one of the things that fascinates me, and I make note of this all the time in my private conversations with people when we talk about the Supreme Court, and now we'll talk about it publicly here. And I'm sure I've said it publicly before somewhere. But what always fascinates me about the court when I look at it right now is that what you have is the most diverse Supreme Court we've ever had. You got Sotomayor, you got Ketanji Brown Jackson, you've got a couple white women, you've got there's just a variety. You got Clarence Thomas, of course, African American, wrong most of the time, but an African American nonetheless. My point is, you have the most diverse court ever in the history of this country. And yet, to your earlier point, I could take you back a few frames when the court had 9 white males on it. 9 white males, and argue that we made more progress then than we're making now with the most diverse court, not ideologically, but certainly in every other aspect. The most diverse court in this country is taking us backwards when, again, speaking of back in the day, a court of all white males advanced us. It's a fascinating irony for me. How do you read that?
I think you're right. And I think, we all know all skin folk aren't kinfolk.
Exactly.
And Clarence Thomas does his best every day to remind us of that. And so, I actually think because we, and by we, I mean Black people, are a minority in this country. It always stuns me to realize Black people are only 13% of Americans. I'm like, but we're everywhere. We're in, in everything. That can't be right. But I think what that says is, maybe I'll turn that a little bit and say maybe that's hopeful in that, you can, Thurgood Marshall very famously said when he retired, he was very sad to retire. Justice Brennan, a white man, had been the other liberal lion on the court, had written so many opinions upholding the rights of women and minorities. And when Justice Brennan retired, Marshall was ill, he was older, and he just kind of needed to step down. But when asked about, should there be a Black person nominated to replace him, Marshall said no. Marshall said there's no difference between a black snake and a white snake. They both bite. That's what he said. And we have that in the series because he knew just what you're pointing out. It's where your heart and your head are that are the most important things. So I am extremely proud of Ketanji Brown Jackson because she is a brilliant jurist, hard stop. She is so smart and so thoughtful. And so, that is kind of where we hope that the future nominations will come. There will be people in her mold.
When you look back on her confirmation process, how do you read what you saw, what all the rest of us saw? Brilliant though she was, they gave her a hard time. How did you read the confirmation process for KBJ?
We also know that what our parents always tell us, we have to be twice as good to, be considered. And so she is 55 times as good. Yep. And still they went after her qualifications. And all I can say to that is that should be a lesson to us, is that for some people, it doesn't matter what our qualifications are. The first thing and the only thing they're going to see is this supposed inferiority. Yeah. And so I can't be bothered in my time with worrying about people who I'm never going to convince, who I shouldn't have to convince of my worth. But for her confirmation particularly, I think you're seeing the ugliest side of politics. You're seeing people question a Harvard law undergrad, a Harvard Law Review editor-in-chief who had a stellar record on the bench. And so there was no question about her qualifications. So, that's the ugliest side of politics. That is not a surprise based on where we are today.
The series is called Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court, a 4-part documentary series tracing the modern history of the Supreme Court. Currently available on Paramount Plus with Showtime. The force behind that series, Deadlocked, Don Porter, is our guest in this hour. When we come forward, a conversation about John Roberts, the Chief Justice of this present Supreme Court. And I want to unpack this notion of what it actually means. I don't know what the other way would be to do this, but what does it mean that the U.S. Supreme Court chooses the cases it wants to hear. They choose the cases that they want to hear. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. African-American Simone Biles is once again making gymnastics history. The 26-year-old became the first woman to do the Yurchenko double pike at the World Gymnastics Championships in Belgium yesterday. Now, to pull off this maneuver, a gymnast needs immense strength and precision to pull their body around twice. The NFL Las Vegas Raiders are releasing star defensive end African-American Chandler Jones. Jones was arrested on Friday in Las Vegas after allegedly violating a domestic violence temporary protective order. The four-time Pro Bowler has been away from the team since Labor Day weekend following multiple social media posts criticizing the team. The team says they hope that he receives the care he needs. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
In Baldwin Park, we've got a wreck working with a big rig, a pickup, and another vehicle. Everything's moving off to the right shoulder there. 605 northbound before the 10. Some minor delay from Valley Boulevard. A work zone in East LA, 60 westbound Atlantic Boulevard to the 710 with a right lane closure. And working in Hollywood on the 101 South at Gower Street, the on-ramp closed until 2.
At your Amazon Fresh store, you can rely on roasted chicken for $4.97, 2-pound bunches of bananas for 99 cents, French bread for 89 cents, and more. Visit your local Amazon Fresh store for low prices from A to Z and head to amazon.com/savewithfresh to see this week's deals.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Since 2010, Blindster has sold millions of custom blinds, shades, and shutters to satisfied customers across the country with 20,000 5-star reviews and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. Custom blinds at low prices and free shipping. Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. A good day for both of LA's NFL teams. The Chargers and Rams are 2-2 after close wins. The Chargers beat the Raiders by 7 despite getting shut out in the second half. Linebacker Khalil Mack had 6 sacks, one shy of the NFL single-game record. The Rams get an overtime win at Indianapolis after blowing a 23-point lead. 22-yard touchdown pass from Matthew Stafford to Puka Nacua in OT gave the Rams a walk-off win. The Rams play Philadelphia next Sunday at SoFi. For the second straight year, the Dodgers finished the regular season with 100 wins. The Dodgers are off until Saturday. They will play the winner of the Arizona-Milwaukee series. The best-of-3 series starts on Tuesday. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Do you have both Medi-Cal and Medicare?
If so, the new LA Care plan called Medicare Plus can help you get the most out of your health plan for $0.
LA Care provides personalized service to Angelinos like us.
Plus, it gives us access to doctors and specialists across Los Angeles County.
For zero cost, we get access to full benefits.
From vision coverage,
in-home support services,
to prescription drug coverage and a quarterly over-the-counter allowance.
plus personal equipment.
Meal programs,
a gym membership,
and so much more.
For more than 25 years,
LA Care has provided Angelinos with access to quality health care at an affordable cost.
For our families,
our seniors,
our community,
it's a plus.
It's a plus
for all of us.
In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, children are the future. Here, tobacco companies are committed to higher education, offering scholarships to students who submit essays about the benefits of vaping. The tobacco industry even sponsors summer camps for kids. Don't worry, the tobacco-sponsored programs have been linked to leaving your kids more interested in smoking. In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, the world's deadliest industry is your child's friend. See reality at undo.org.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Indeed, our guest in this hour is Don Porter, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker behind this brilliant project called Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court, in case you've just tuned in. I mentioned earlier that today the Supreme Court begins its new term. Summer recess is over. They are back to work with a bunch of divisive issues on the docket. I don't know that we could be any more disappointed this term than we were last term. One of our previous guests today, Connie Rice, regular contributor, was talking about the fact that she thinks it's going to be a case-by-case this time. They are fully aware, Chief Justice John Roberts is fully aware of their low poll numbers, their respect and regard amongst fellow Americans writ large is as low as it's ever been. He's fully aware of that. He's fully aware that Americans were very disappointed in many of the decisions by this last court. And so there are thoughts about whether or not they're going to track a bit more to the center this time around, or whether or not they're going to be even more rabid this time around. Don, you care to put a wager on that, whether they're going to track more to the center, whether it's going to be a case-by-case situation, or whether they're going to be even more rabid this term than they were the last term?
Yeah, I'm going to take the over on that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why, because that's what we're already seeing. So you're absolutely right that, John Roberts has not changed, the person he is or his view about law. John Roberts is the person who, authored and pretty much led the charge to invalidate, the portion of the Voting Rights Act that protected, so many protections, that provided so many protections. So he hasn't changed his opinion, and yet we see him voting against Alabama and their racially unconstitutional attempts to limit the ability of Black folks to vote. You see just last week the Supreme Court declined to, hear Alabama's appeal. Alabama had a naked appeal to only have one majority Black district in a state that's 27% Black. And so the lower courts said that is unconstitutional. Alabama appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declined to step in. So that is significant, and it speaks to just what you're talking about. The court is very much aware of the negative polling that it has. And why is polling important? Because the court does not have an army. It does not have finances. The court has public opinion. We obey the court because we believe that its decisions are legitimate. And if we stop believing that, we're in very murky and I would say dangerous ground. And that's why I wanted to make this series to say this court has been great once before, and it can be great again. But we need to pay attention and to allow the court to say, and to tell the court, you can't just make up new rules of law. You can't just depart from precedent, and you can't abandon the people.
The series is called Deadlocked: How America Shaped the Supreme Court. Currently available once again on Paramount Plus with Showtime. Let me come to something that it's pretty inane, it's pretty rudimentary, pretty basic, and yet I find that it's worth reminding the audience from time to time that the U.S. Supreme Court chooses the cases it wants to hear. They pick the cases that they want to hear. There's no deep, brilliant question here, but there's a lot in there to work with if you choose to do so. How do you read that reality? And again, I'm the first to tell you, I don't know what the other option would be. I just know it's worth reminding people every term when they get more and more crazy, more and more rabid, they move further and further to the right. Be clear that they choose the cases that they want to hear. I'll let you unpack that any way you want to unpack it, Don Porter.
Yeah, well, Tavis, that's actually a really important procedure that you're pointing to. So there are thousands of cases that are appealed to the Supreme Court every year, and of course they couldn't hear all of them even if they wanted to. It's something like more than 7,000 cases are appealed, and the court usually hears less than 200 of those. And one of the things that people have noticed is the court is hearing even fewer cases than it ever has in its history. And people are questioning, why is that the case? One reason people are looking to is it's hearing more cases. So there's a few different ways cases get to the Supreme Court. The most usual way is on appeal from a lower court decision.
Mm-hmm.
There's another way that you can get to the Supreme Court, and that's in an emergency opinion. And that usually happens if there's an emergency, if there's a war, or if there's a death penalty case that's being appealed to the Supreme Court. But something interesting has been happening in the last several years, and that really happened with Donald Trump. Donald Trump appealed more cases on an emergency basis to the Supreme Court than in the prior 2 decades. So between George Bush II, two terms, so 8 years,
Sure.
and Barack Obama, 8 years. So in that 16 years, Obama and George Bush together appealed on an emergency basis 8 times, and the court granted emergency review 4 times. In Trump's presidency, he appealed to the court on an emergency basis 38 times. And the court granted emergency review 29 times. So think about what happens when you appeal on an emergency basis. It disrupts all your other business. It pushes everything else to the side. And why is this important? Because the court is deciding things like, can Trump do a Muslim ban on an emergency basis? Can Trump stop the CDC from issuing COVID rules on an emergency basis? So these kinds of decisions that are written, when you rule on an emergency basis, there's no opinions. We were talking about the importance of dissents earlier. Sometimes you'll get a dissent, but you don't have the full briefing and consideration that a case of constitutional significance should have. And so the justices are making these emergency rulings, and we're not quite sure what we're supposed to follow in the law. So that's just one of the things that is happening with this Supreme Court that you could say, this is not political. This is a change in procedure that's affecting the laws that govern all of our lives.
I got 45 seconds for this answer, and it shouldn't take much longer than that anyway. But what does it say about Donald Trump that he appealed to the Supreme Court in the emergency situation that many times? How do I read that reality?
Donald Trump wants what he wants, and he thought that he had put in place a court that would do his bidding. And sadly, that turned out to be the case.
When we come forward, talking to Don Porter, again, the award-winning filmmaker behind this new project, Deadlocked: How America Shaped the Supreme Court. streaming now on Paramount Plus with Showtime. I want to come right to this notion of a code of ethics. We discussed this earlier on today's program, but I've been waiting to get to Dawn to ask her about it. Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito seem to have gotten away with a whole bunch of stuff, Clarence Thomas in particular, because the Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics. We're talking about how America has shaped this Supreme Court. Why does it not have a code of ethics? We'll get to that and a bit more when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
A sense of peace, a place to kick back and put down roots, a lasting legacy. However you define home, at City National, we're committed to helping you get there with our City National Ladder Up Home Loan Program. Find the full benefits at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National Bank, here for our clients and communities. Ladder Up program is available only in select areas. Terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS ID 536994.
Hey, son. How are you feeling?
I'm fine, Pops.
What's on your mind?
I can't explain it. Navigating without a compass, eyes waiting, started to wonder. Metamorphosis, the loss of who you thought you was.
When your kid can't find the language, help them find the lyrics. Listen to the Sound It Out album and get tips and tools to start a conversation at sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by Ad Council and Pivotal Ventures.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or whether anyone cares about them.
But the reality is, 1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis and giving them the support and tools they need to succeed in life. To learn more, go to covenanthouse.org today. Thank you for caring.
Only 1 in 5 people with autism are employed, despite many having the skill set and desire to work.
Maybe it's because employers don't know what kind of jobs they can do. Like, what about a programmer?
That's a job for someone with autism.
How about a healthcare worker?
Yep, that is too. People with autism can do a lot of different jobs, but often get overlooked due to outdated stigmas. Introducing WIN by Autism Speaks. We help businesses lead the way in inclusive hiring.
What about a ranch hand?
To learn more, go to autismspeaks.org/win.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look. And unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So, let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California, once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at a gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event. Or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
We're talking, Don Porter, about your new series for Paramount Plus at Showtime called Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court. One of the things that we did not do, America did not do in shaping the Supreme Court, was to install a code of ethics. And Clarence Thomas has just run roughshod over that reality. Samuel Alito ain't much better. But when you look at the ways that fellow citizens view this Supreme Court, the more these stories come out about how they're getting hooked up by all their friends, oftentimes friends who have cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court from which they never recused themselves, it's a damning indictment of the U.S. Supreme Court, and Alito and Thomas are two of the ones to blame for that. What say you at this point in the history of the Supreme Court about the fact that they do not have a code of ethics?
I think it's one of the saddest moments in our Supreme Court history, and it pains me to see such shame brought to the court. It is unbelievable that 9 unelected people with a lifetime tenure are the only judges in our country who do not have a basic code of ethics. We are far beyond the self-regulating, physician heal thyself. We are far beyond that, because we have seen, unfortunately, that Clarence Thomas in particular is not able to abide by any code of decency or ethics. It is surreal to me that his mother's home is owned by a billionaire with an agenda with cases that come before the court. There is no excuse for that. There is just literally no excuse for that.
Harlan Crow is his name, by the way. He bought Clarence Thomas' mama's house and paid for his nephew to go to college and has given him all kinds of luxury gifts and trips, et cetera, et cetera. These stories just keep coming out. And again, as I said earlier, it appears to me that Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito have skated once again. And even though the Democrats have the authority in the Senate to do something about this, they refuse to do anything about it. Why they're afraid to take on Clarence Thomas and Alito on the Supreme Court, I do not know. For all the complaining they do about the decisions coming from the court, they won't do anything to address this. Dick Durbin out of Illinois has the authority as head of that committee to do more about it, and just disappointed in Dick Durbin for not doing more in that regard to call this Supreme Court on the carpet, as it were. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Don Porter talking about this new project, Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court, what does she say about reforming the court? There are any number of ways that have been discussed, ending life terms, expanding the number of members of the court. We've been talking about how we've shaped the Supreme Court to date. I guess the question is, in our remaining moments, how we perhaps rethink the court in the years to come. You're listening to Don Porter right now on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between 2 turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for voting rights. When We All Vote is a leading national nonpartisan initiative on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election by helping to close the race and age gap. Created by Michelle Obama, When We All Vote brings together individuals, institutions, brands, and organizations to register new voters across the country and advance civic education for the entire family and voters of every age to build an informed and engaged electorate for today and generations to come. When We All Vote empowers their supporters and volunteers to take action through voting, advocating for their rights, and holding their elected officials accountable. Please visit whenweallvote.org to stand up for your rights, voting rights. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly?
What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Heart failure, carpal tunnel syndrome, shortness of breath, stomach issues, lower back pain. How does it all add up? If you have heart failure and any of those seemingly unrelated symptoms sound familiar, it's time to talk with your cardiologist and get the full picture. They may add up to transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy. ATTR-CM is a rare and underdiagnosed disease. Recognize the signs and discuss them with your doctor soon. Learn more at connectwithyourheart.com. That's connectwithyourheart.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Just got a few minutes left in this conversation with Dawn Porter, which I've enjoyed immensely, about her new project called Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court. It's a 4-part documentary series running right now on Paramount Plus with Showtime. So, Dawn, we've been talking about how we've shaped it to date. Let's close by talking about how we rethink it perhaps in the future. You've done this 4-part series. What say you about all the talk, all the conversation, which I think is growing? I hear a chorus that's gaining more voices about the fact that now is the time to look at some meaningful reforms for the U.S. Supreme Court. What say you?
I agree. I think at a minimum, the court should abide by the same kind of ethical rules that are in place for every other judge or, administrative law judge has more ethical restrictions than a member of the United States Supreme Court, and there's no reason for that. I do think we're in very serious times. The challenges that are facing us are literally life and death challenges. And so I think that we should have, if we're to have this institution last for another 200 years, you criticize your loved ones in order to protect them, right? And so I think that we need to look at things like, would term limits actually be possible? What kinds of other reforms could we imagine? And just before we close, I just want to say something to you, Tavis, because it is so important for Black people to be paying attention to the court. So many of our interests are come before the court, and too many of our people are not up to speed on what is happening. So I just really want to thank you for having these conversations, for making sure that we are educated and informed, because we have power when we come together. And you're doing so much to make sure that people have this information. And I just really want to thank you for that.
You were kind. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Let me ask you whether or not you think, at the end of this conversation, that this court, in fact, has too much power. I'm sure you've been following, as I've been following, what's happening in Israel and Bibi Netanyahu and all their efforts to ring in their Supreme Court. And around the globe, it is the case that no country, no Supreme Court of any country has as much power as this Supreme Court does in these United States. Does this court have too much power?
I don't think that the court has too much power, but I don't think but I do think that we need to remind the court that it is part of a system of checks and balances. And that if it does not behave responsibly, ethically, legitimately, that the court is in danger of losing its reputation and therefore its authority. So I don't think it has too much power. I just think that all parts of our government need to be working together to make sure that there are those checks and balances in place.
And in the 45 seconds I have left, just run me right quick through the 4 parts to this documentary.
Yes, we have episode 1, which is largely about Marshall and the Warren Court. Episode 2 deals with Nixon, who campaigned on overturning the Warren Court decisions, who was very upset. It goes to the history of Roe v. Wade and how that was not a controversial decision. Episode 3 gets into Bush v. Gore. We talked about, is this court political? How the court stopped the counting of votes in Florida rather than letting the process take its course. And then episode 4 is something of our blockbuster, and it deals with the current court, although it does not get into detail about all the ethics conversations because we had to stop somewhere, and the court kept doing unethical things, and so we didn't get to them.
No.
But I hope you will watch and you will understand how we got to this place. And that's what, if you watch all 4 episodes, it gives you the background of how we got here. It didn't just happen overnight. It was intentional.
Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Dawn Porter, her latest showcase project is called Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court, streaming right now on Paramount Plus with Showtime. Dawn, congrats on a brilliant piece of work. Good to have you on this program.
Thank you so much.
A conversation with the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, as we launch today on WVON 1690 AM in the Windy City. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. African-American Simone Biles is once again making gymnastics history. The 26-year-old became the first woman to do the Yurchenko double